for starters, I'm very excited to have you on, Miss Diaz.
Oh, we're already
My
recording?
dear friend Issa. Yeah,
Yeah, we just record.
Oh, okay.
we just jump right into it. Nick
I
does all the fun stuff afterwards. I just
Mm-hmm.
show up.
Sounds good to
I just
me.
show up. But yeah, very excited to have you here. Long friend of mine and friend of Nick's wife,
Yep.
Issa. So we kind of wanted to dig in a little bit with where you've come from, how you started your career path, where you're at now, kind of thing, because I think it's really insightful. I'm going to give you all the props, but I don't want to blow your head up. But you're doing
Too
an
late.
amazing job, and it's really inspiring. So,
Well, yeah, I was going to say,
um,
let's call it out really quick. So, Issa, you, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, you are an online, like a fashion reseller, right? Like that's what your business
Yeah.
is that you, yeah. When did you start? Like, when did this even become a thing for you?
So it's really funny because it started as a hobby, and I'll kind of talk about that later because I know that there's a thing I have with hobbies, so we'll talk about that. But it started literally,
Yeah.
I've been working in corporate America for a long time in fashion. I'm trying to move up the ladder. Like my ultimate goal is to be a CMO, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a college dropout, so like I figured I would have to work extra hard to get there. And in between,
Right.
I leave fashion and I go into CPG, marketing, sales for a beer brand. I don't know if we can say it, but um, and I start doing that, but I'm sick of fashion at that point. Like I'm freaking sick of it. It is a little like Devil Wears Prada. Like it's a bunch of girls trying to go for the same positions, or back when I was there, right? A lot of cutthroat competition. They don't pay you anything because they know that a lot of girls want to get into the higher positions, right? So
Right.
I left all of that. I went to the beer company. I was making great money, but I was friggin', slinging beer to like bars and restaurants and liquor stores and stuff like that. So I am a fashion girl at heart. Like I love clothes and runways and I just love all that stuff. Even though I wear like sweatpants
Mm-hmm.
95% of the time, like I just love learning about it, but it
Yeah.
is what it is.
you have
But
your
I was
go-to for outfits for sure.
that Marco's always like, dude, if I just brought out the pictures I have of you at home, I would crush your empire. Like fashion lady who was what he said. But
Yeah.
he's got some like really weird, like bad outfits that I've chose. Like there's some leopard print sweatpants that happen. So anyway,
Isn't that the
I
thing that
I
they
love
started going.
that.
they'll always say with like hairdressers or like makeup artists that they just look like dog shit, but they can make everybody else look
Yeah,
amazing? Isn't that like typically how it goes?
yeah. Yeah, it literally, like, I know exactly what clothes are, like, worth what and what's in style and whatever. The fact that choose to wear rags is just, personal choice. But, so anyway, I
Yeah.
missed fashion. And so I was starting to go to, in LA, we have, like, a really crazy world where there's a lot of rich people that don't need their stuff and don't want to deal with it. So it's one thing to go into Goodwill and listen, there's a lot of resellers that do this and they find crazy deals at Goodwill. But I was going to the buy sell trade stores in LA, which are Crossroads, Buffalo
Hmm.
Exchange, where people go in, bring their stuff they don't want, and they get paid like some amount. They trade it for cash or credit, and then they go. But in LA, you've got
Yeah.
freaking stylists dumping off boxes and boxes of designer clothes, or rich people sending their assistants to dump off clothes at Crossroads. I bet you they don't even get the cash back. They're like, "Hey, assistant, take whatever you get for it. I just want it gone." So I started going
Right.
there, and dude, they were like, I like just distinctly remember some Prada shoes that had never been worn. It looked like a lady like walked outside on her porch for a second and like walked back in, and they were $80. You're talking about $800 shoes for $80. So I was like,
Yeah.
thank you. So I started picking those up and I started just doing it for fun. Like that was my fun
Yeah.
Saturday activity. Some people like to play tennis, some people like to do sports. I like to dig through those stores for treasures. So that's kind of how it
Hmm.
happened. It was my Saturday hobby. I would drag Alicia in with me, and she was so mad at me. She
Yeah.
hated going.
It is my nightmare. It's my
I was gonna
nightmare.
ask Alicia, what's your Saturday hobby? What do you?
I will do activities. I'm like, let's go to the beach. Let's go kayaking. Let's go on a hike. Let's do
No,
this.
nobody
Every
wants to
time.
hike.
So like
White
every
people do.
time Issa would be like, hey, do you want to go grab coffee? I knew the next step was we were spending 2 to 3 hours in 3 different crossroads, a Buffalo, or out here in LA, there's a thing called the Beverly Connection,
Okay.
which is like
Oh.
it's TJ Maxx, Ross, Marshalls,
Uh-huh.
and
The-
Nordstrom Rack.
And Stacks Off. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's the
So-
trifecta. You go in there, it's like the Bermuda Triangle, and you
trifecta.
don't leave. You stay there till the end. There's a Panera in case you start losing steam. You just go get a sandwich real quick and you just go.
I love that.
Issa and I are the quintessential when opposites attract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know. But she loved it. And I thought that was like, I mean, that was her thing, right? So you'd go into her house and there's this wall of shoes, and it's like her living room was no longer like a proper living room anymore.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like that's how it all started.
Right.
So
Wait,
I mean,
remember when Marco got mad at me for having all the shoes, so he started collecting bikes, and I get mad about the bikes, and he said things like, "Then move your shoes," and I was like, it got really weird for a while.
So Issa,
Yeah.
when you're like initially going and you're finding these like, you know, these pieces of gold, like sort of thing, are you
Yeah.
like you initially knew you're like, it's all online resale, like that's what I'm doing. It's not that like I
Yeah.
know someone personally that might like this or I want this. It's how can I put this online and make some extra scratch?
So I think it was a combination of a little bit of me wanting stuff for me. And
Right.
I remember actually, so when I was younger, I worked at all the really expensive, like I worked at Nordstrom's, I worked at Bloomingdale's, and I couldn't afford the stuff that I was selling, right? Like
Mhm.
it's interesting because you're in there, you learn about consumer behavior, like pricing, branding, like what sells, what doesn't sell, why it doesn't sell, the markdowns, all of that. But you're surrounded by all these items that you can't afford, right?
Yeah.
Like I just wasn't in a place to buy anything, even with my 30 on top of 30 on top of 30. Didn't keep me from
Mhm.
spending money there, but I probably shouldn't have. And
Right.
so when I was younger, I started kind of understanding that like there were stores like this in San Diego where I grew up that sold secondhand stuff. And it's really weird because Alicia knows about this. I grew up with really rich people, like
Mhm.
crazy, crazy opposite for me. And so
Yeah.
these girls were getting like, you know, BMWs on their 16th birthday and like could buy whatever they wanted.
Must be
And I
nice.
had to go, you know, like I had to be resourceful if I wanted some new jeans or whatever. So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
came kind of from that. But I
Yeah.
had a really unique perspective where I did have rich friends and I knew what they were buying and I knew what was
Mhm.
cool and I knew what they were spending money on. And I knew the brands that I would want to buy, but I couldn't afford $200 jeans or whatever they were back then, 150. Now they're like 300, which is insane.
Yeah.
Right.
So it kind of came from that. That's where I kind of first knew about these stores, like Flashbacks in San Diego and stuff like that. But I didn't grow up shopping secondhand or anything. In Mexico, it's really funny because it's kind of a cultural thing where you don't only now is it acceptable to maybe say that you're buying secondhand, regardless of your need
Mm.
to buy it, right? Because it's like a pride thing for families. Like you don't want to say my parents can't afford it, or parents are like, I don't want people to think I can't get my daughter the best or whatever. So there's this
Interesting.
very taboo thing where like even when I would borrow dresses from like friends or whatever, you wouldn't tell people like, oh, it's borrowed, or you know what I mean? It's just it was a
Right.
really strange kind of cultural thing back then.
Yeah.
We had hand-me-downs and stuff like in family and stuff, but you didn't go around telling people like, oh, my cousin gave me all her dresses or whatever. You know what I mean?
Oh God.
So
My mom was
it was
telling
this
everybody.
weird.
My mom
Yeah,
was telling
it's different.
everybody
It's
about the
culturally.
the hand-me-down Oshkosh bagashas that she was forcing me into. God knows how late in life. But, that's crazy though. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's a little bit, it's changed now because they've kind of wrapped in the environmental part of it. Like, why are we buying so much crap if you could buy
Mm,
secondhand? But it was kind of something that I didn't tell my friends I was shopping secondhand for a while because it
yeah.
was just like, oh, well, and I would find really cool pieces, and they'd be like, oh, where'd you get that? And I'm like, oh, yeah, at the store,
Yeah,
at
yeah, yeah.
my work, I
This
got a
little
discount or
boutique.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, this little boutique in the middle of nowhere. And so that kind of prompted, like, that started my curiosity with that.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't, when I was so eventually in life, I was a retail buyer at some point for a big brand. I don't know if we could say brands, but we had 11 stores. So I literally was a professional buyer for them. And that's really also when I started like, this is essentially every business. They buy something and they resell it to you for more money, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's funny because a lot
Right.
of people get mad at resellers for reselling from Goodwill and the bins and like the buy sell trade stores. And it's like, why aren't you
Right.
mad at Target then? Right? Target
Sure.
didn't pay $5 for
Capitalism,
your
baby.
shampoo. You paid.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Why do I feel like a light bulb just went off for me? And I'm like, duh. Like, because I have
Duh.
seen, I feel like, with people in your business where
Yeah.
they're like, oh, I can't believe you're reselling it like this. And you're like, that is literally what everybody else is doing. Even these little
Yeah.
boutiques that you're like, shop local. You're like, there's
Well, they
still
have to make a profit. I mean, there's still time, energy that
correct.
goes. I mean, Issa knows this better than anybody about what it takes for them.
Right.
Yeah, for it's so. Yeah, they got to turn a profit.
It's just a weird disconnect where we're taught to like, it's funny they're hating on these tiny micro businesses of people physically going and reselling items, but you're not mad at Target or Walmart. Walmart, who has most of their people on food stamps, like even
Yeah,
Walmart,
it's
the
every.
Walmart, sorry, we have a lag, but it's just
There you go.
funny how people get mad at us. Not honestly, I don't get as much shit as people that have that source at Goodwill and the bins. And it's funny there because people are like, "Oh, you're stealing from the poor," and it's like, who do you think is reselling? Not that like.
Sure.
Do you think people reselling are doing it because they have nothing to do with and they're away from their yacht and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out how to fill their time? Like these are people that need extra money to fund their life because it's so expensive to even friggin' get groceries now,
Right.
Like a lot of the friends that
Sure.
I've made in the community are like, dude, I grew up poor. I grew up thrifting. Like, is there a limit to where we're able to shop for used items on income or something? Like it's ridiculous. And then they go into the stores and go look at the back ends, right, at the back rooms, and they're completely overstocked, like overfilled. They have nowhere to put all these donations. And so it's like a ridiculous
Right.
argument that they're posting on their iPhone. Like, like it's just people have a big disconnect on like what their lives revolve around and what makes the world go round. And like, before you get mad at a reseller trying to make a few extra bucks at, Goodwill, go yell at Target. Stop shopping there then.
How much I had no clue that was a thing within your community of that there is a lot of I'm assuming it's just online hate, but just hate for like a smaller market reseller. You think it just comes out of animosity that
Yeah.
people are like kind of ticked that you're like, oh, I see that person over there and they're being scrappy and they're
Yeah.
finding a way to, I mean, again, be their own boss sort of thing.
Like, why didn't I think of this?
Yes, that's what I would have assumed.
Yeah.
It's just out of like I'm going to shit on you sort of thing because you're doing well.
Absolutely. And it happens at all levels, right? Like it happens.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the online hate is jealousy. Like it's a mirror of somebody showing you what you could do, but don't like choose to, or just
Yep.
don't want to, or don't know where to start. Or it's funny because I don't get that kind of hate as much. Rarely do I get that kind of hate. I get more of the like, well, she's rich, so that's why she can flip designer. Where do you think the money came from?
Sure.
Like I don't have a trust fund. Like all
Right.
that money that I'm dumping into designer, I made myself. And
They
so it's
probably
kind of
have,
this.
yeah, they probably have weird associations because you sell at a high bar, like the items and the quality. So they're then
Yeah.
just associating of like, well, then she must be just like got money coming
Right.
out of every orifice sort of thing. You're like, no, dude, what are you talking about?
And you know what? It does take capital to get to the point where you can flip the bigger goods, right? But again, you build that. Like nobody
Yeah.
gave me that money. It's this weird, and then I get even more hate on the information side. So I try to teach people to do what I do because I have a business background, and a lot of the people in this community don't.
Yeah.
And so what I try to do is kind of like teach them. There's a lot of people teaching them how to resell, like go on to these stores on these days and find these tags and whatever. I'm teaching them to run a business because I think that matters more than anything, right?
Yeah.
But I get a lot of hate for it. So then people are like, oh, you must not be making money as a reseller. And that's why you have to teach people. And it's like,
I want to
sometimes
come back to this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to come back to this because you and I have sat down and talked when we first met for my wedding about some of this stuff. And I have questions to ask you about this. I was super curious. So you were doing this early on as a hobby. You're dragging Alicia so she can't go to the bar and get all turd. You're going and you're finding these like, what was the moment then of when the light bulb went off and you were like, oh, maybe I want to leave my cushy corporate job and pursue this full time?
So it's funny because I think it kind of happened. There were a few things that happened in my life that started that. Like there was one thing that started the snowball, and then just a few things along the path pushed me off with a point of no return. I think one of them was meeting Marco was absolutely life changing because you and Alicia can attest to this. Like, I was kind of a mess before I met him in terms of like finances and any of that. I didn't know anything. Then I met a guy that's German, right? His family went through the war. They escaped East Germany with a little box and they saved their way up to what they have now. So he was brought up in a very like, don't waste, save for the hard times, like be resourceful, don't just, like Marco used to get really mad at me because if something was broken, I was like, let's just get a new one. We have to get a new one, like a toaster or whatever. And Marco's like, you can fix that. Like, do you know you can fix the toaster, right? And so I think I just got really caught up, even though I didn't have money, I got really caught up in the wasteful side of, the American ideology or whatever before now, because back then we didn't think so much about the planet or the universe or whatever, and not the universe, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think it was just kind of this weird like meeting someone that was so completely different to me, and then we moved in right away. Like we met, and then in 3 months we moved in. And I think when you move in with someone is when you really start to see what they're like in their real life, which is your finances, right? And when we moved in, I had a really good job. Like for those times, I got paid really well. I got my car paid for, gasoline paid for, and we had a corporate card that we could basically put food on every day. So I had zero expenses. Your homegirl was driving a brand new BMW 3 Series with leather interiors, and I had $0 in my savings account, minus $1,500 on credit, which isn't that bad compared to other people's debt, but I had nothing to my name. And so we want to move into this place, and I'm like, hey Marco, so here's the thing. I don't have money for the down payment. I don't have money for the furniture that we need. Like, I really don't have much right now, but in a couple of months, let's talk. And so he put all of that down, and he was like totally fine with that. And then a few months later, I think when we were actually living life together, he sat me down one day and he's like, why don't you ever have money? Like, you work enough, right? You make good money. Where does it go? And I was like, dude, I've been asking myself the same question for years. I have no idea where my money is. Like none of it, right? And he used to play these, like, he used to say these funny things like, don't you wish, what if you take all your tax returns and see how much money you've made in the years just to see how much you would have had? And I'm like, that sounds like no fun at all. But things like that make you think about what you're doing with your life,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the first time where I was like, can you help me? And he's like, I can help you,
Yeah.
but you have to listen, because I'm not that good at listening to other people's direction. So there
Right.
were a lot of fights over that when he started to help me. But one of the first moments where I was like, I want to stick into the ground right now was when he started going through my bank accounts. And he's like, well, show me what you spend like a month or whatever. And I opened
Yeah.
up Chase, and I remember Alicia knows him well. He's got a really thick German accent, sounds like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he was going through the charges, and he's like, what's $80 every 2 weeks? Sugar nail. And I was like, somebody
Sugar
unalive me
nail.
right now. Like, shit. Like, $80 every 2 weeks on manicure and pedicure gel. I was so embarrassed to tell him that I was like, this is a problem. If I
Yeah. Yeah.
literally want the ground to suck me in right now, like, I'm probably doing something that I shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, that was one of the moments where I was like, this is insane. Why am I
Yeah.
living like this, right? And then, so he, in our new plan, he made me give the BMW back. He's like, you can't afford this. And I was like, me. So I got a Jetta, right? So they still paid for the car, but he's like, why are you paying $500 a month when you can pay 280 or whatever? So that started that
Right.
road.
Right.
And then he starts kind of talking to me about like, he knew that I like to do the resale stuff, right? And he's like, why don't you do more? Because he was seeing my returns. I was telling him what I was doing. And he's like, that's great money for shopping, right? You go on
Yeah.
Saturdays, shop for a couple hours, and then you make all this money. And he's like, what if you grew that? So it's kind of like the support of a partner going, hey, maybe this is something else. Maybe this isn't just my
Mm.
stupid Saturday hobby or fun Saturday hobby or whatever. Um, and then I was trying really hard to climb that corporate ladder and get to CMO, right? I got offered other jobs. They tried to give me like manager and this other thing and whatever was in the sales department. I was like, if I don't move to marketing, I don't want another job. And Alicia
Hmm.
knows this too. Like, I was
Yeah.
really firm on my, if I'm not moving to there, I'm not giving up my freedom, because we had no schedule when we were in sales. It was so nice. It was so
Right.
chill. And then I moved into I so they promoted me to brand manager of the main brand. And there was a group of us that managed it because it was so big. And in there was the next realization where you're like, I thought this was my dream job, right? I'm getting closer. I've got a little more like clout. I'm actually making some decisions on something that I
Hmm.
love. And I loved my boss, and I loved the environment, and I loved the guys that I worked with, all guys and me. Um, but it was this weird realization that maybe this isn't my dream job. Maybe it's just
Yeah.
a job, and now I gave away my freedom. Now I have to go to a 9 to 7, sit in this like cubicle with like white walls. Even though we had cool art and like cool people, it was kind of a bummer.
Sure.
Yeah.
Um, that was kind of the next step into what the hell am I doing here? And then the final step was again Marco going, like, you could probably make what you make flipping stuff online, like
Yeah.
you could, like, we started really doing the math on what was coming out of this. And he's like, I feel like you could do it. And so by this time, he taught me to save. He taught me about the stock market. He taught me about all this stuff. When I met him, I literally was worth like negative $2,000, right? Which
Hmm.
isn't crazy debt, but I was negative on my net worth. And by the time I left corporate America, I had about like 50, 60,000 in like stocks and savings.
Hmm.
So he was like, dude, jump. Like, worst case, it doesn't work out and you just get another job or whatever.
Right.
And I talked to the
Right.
CMO, and he's the coolest guy ever. Like, I love him. I absolutely love him. We had a really long talk. And Marco wanted to go like travel the world, just leave and go for like a few months and travel. And I was talking to the CMO because I was like, I'm really torn. Like, I thought this is what I wanted to do, but now that I'm in here, I love you. I love you guys, but this just isn't me.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, you only live once. You're so young. You guys have got the opportunity to go. Like, Marco's got his place there. Go. Like, why wouldn't you go? Like, worst case, like, I'll take you back. And I was like,
Yeah.
sold.
That's super nice. I mean, just to have
Yeah.
from someone that is like, obviously you have admiration for, but for them to validate you in that way and be like, go do this. That's got to be such a nice, just kind of, just like shove out the door sort of thing. Right.
He's the
I think so.
coolest person.
Yeah, and I think something else to like recognize, because, we've all have these, like, I mean, Nick and I talk a lot about all these little ideas and wanting to be your own boss. And you can have people in your corner being like, like validating you and saying, yes, you should do this. You can, you could do X, Y, and Z, but it's still really, really scary to take the jump, and only you can like make that final stamp. So, I think that that's something to be, I'm very impressed by that, because you and I talk a lot, and I'm just a scaredy cat when it comes to things like
Takes
that.
guts, that's for sure.
And there's tons of people that are like, Alicia, you're so smart at X, Y, and Z. You can do this. And I'm like, cool. I just like still scared, and I never take the jump. So it's still really impressive.
It's scary either way, but we can't pretend that money doesn't make it easier, right? Because having a safety net behind you is very difficult. I mean, very different than if I had 4 kids, a mortgage, like big responsibilities. And so Marco's whole point and Dan's whole point, which is funny because they both kind of told me the same thing in their own way, was like, what do you have to lose? Like, you've got money saved, you're young, you've got no responsibilities. Worst case scenario, you could just come back and work for someone again, right? And so that really takes away the fear that so when I talk to my students on my mentorship calls and stuff like that, I harp on them so much to save money in the business and their personal life. Like, have a high yield savings account, have some have options, because that whole money matters. It matters, not in the sense that it buys you happiness, but it freaking buys you time and freedom. Like, that's what we all want. And so, it is scary, but I always tell people who DM me and they're like, I'm so sick of my job. I'm going to quit tomorrow. Like, I think I can make this reselling thing work. I'm like, hold on a second, girlfriend. Like, make a plan, have an exit date, stock up as much cash as you can, figure out your health insurance, because that's a nightmare as a self-employed person.
Oh, yes. Plus
horrible.
One to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those are the things that people really have to think about. And when they really hate it, I'm like, dude, just think about it. Think of it as if this job that you hate is funding your future success. It's funding your business so that one day you can tell them to F off and like have your own thing built and have some money saved. But you don't just jump, especially not in these times.
Yeah.
No.
So you've got support from your partner, you've got a boss or a mentor that's also kind of giving you a nudge in the right direction. You're obviously seeing positive returns, and you're making that shift in your lifestyle to support this venture. What's then like for the Global Collective, because that's your business name, correct?
Yeah.
Right. Where does that kind of idea come out of, from like how I'm going to brand this thing, how I'm going to name it, how I'm going to do everything to push the business side? And it's not just Issa the reseller, it's the Global Collective.
So what's funny is I actually quit reselling when we left the US. I sold all my stuff off, stopped, and I was like, this is it. I'm going to take some time. We're going to go travel, whatever. And Marco and I have a really strong relationship. Like, he's absolutely the best person I've ever met. 10 years. I love him. He's my best friend. The only time, there's been like one time where we were rocky right in the beginning because he was like coming back and forth, and that was really hard.
Yeah.
But other than that, the only time we've ever been like this close to breaking up were the 6 months where I didn't work. I was just here in Germany, or Europe or traveling or whatever, and I didn't work. And dude, I was a giant pain in the ass. Like, there's just no other way to put it.
Sure.
I was awful. I'm used to working. I'm used to creating. I'm used to doing things for myself, right? And so it wasn't about the money. I had money saved. Like, he had money. We're fine. It was what do I do now? What am I if I'm not trying to work towards corporate America? Or what am I good for if I'm not doing anything? And so it was this weird like self-reflection of like, how crazy am I tied? Is my worth tied to my job, right? To
Yeah.
producing? Like, how brainwashed am I after all these years? So I was a freaking pain in the ass. If he would have kicked me out, like I would have been like, I get it. Like I was a nightmare. But he's the best. So instead, he's like, you have time for the first time in your life where you don't have to go run to do something.
Yep.
Do what you like to do. He's like, take classes. You've always said you wanted to learn Photoshop. So sign up for a class and learn how to
Yeah.
Photoshop. Sign up for a design class. Like, do something with your time. Because everyone says, like, oh, if I don't have to work, like, I'm going to become like Susie Kitchen Girl and I'm going to make all these things from scratch and I'm going to
Yep.
grow a garden and I'm going to lose 50 pounds and I'm going to have a six pack. No, you're not.
Yeah.
That's not reality, right? That shit doesn't happen. So I was miserable and I started taking classes and I knew that I wanted to get back to reselling. Like, letting it go, it's so cheesy, but it's like that saying where it's like when you let something go, you'll know if it's really for you,
Right.
because I
Right.
missed it so much. But I was like, if I had to do this again, I'm going to have to find a different way because I also like our travel life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I took a class on Photoshopping and I was super excited. I learned how to Photoshop in 3 months, probably not as a designer, but enough to do like fun little designs and
Yep.
take out the background on pictures. So once that started, I was like, damn, if I could do this, if I could have done this when I was reselling, I bet you I could have gotten more money for my designer flips because now they look nicer. And like these ideas started coming to my head. And I took a design class on Coursera or something like that. And it showed me how to use the other one, not Photoshop, the creative one. What's it called?
I don't know. It's not Canva or whatever, is it?
No, Canva wasn't even around. It was just the other one that's not Photoshop, whatever you use to design. And so in the class, I started learning how to like make logos and stuff.
Oh,
And it's funny
Illustrator?
because Illustrator.
Yep.
Illustrator. And so I started learning that and I started kind of toying with the idea of like, I would love to, because we were traveling a lot. I was like, how cool would it be? We went to China. We did this like month and a half trip to China, Vietnam, Cambodia, and something else.
Yeah.
And I was seeing such cool stuff. And I was like, how cool would it be if I could do like a retail shop where I bring stuff from different parts of the world? And it's kind of like this global vibe. I go to Mexico a lot for my family. And so in my head, I was like, oh, it could be called like the Global Collective. And I'm just doing stuff from all over the world. And it could be tied into like a YouTube video of me traveling and collecting the stuff, Global Collective. Right. It was a cool idea then. And then it just kind of parked there for a while because I wasn't really going to actually start buying stuff and figure out the logistics. And then I started creating logos for the Global Collective. It wasn't anything, but I started creating, logos for this imaginary business.
Yep.
And I started playing with colors. And it's weird. It started to take on this life of its own. Like it started to just exist. And I was like, could I do reselling again, even though I'm far away? And I started just kind of like, at night, I would be like, well, I could get a friend and I could ship everything to her and then I'd pay her. And then, it just kind of slowly started coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day I was like, I remember the stocks. There was like a big drop in stocks and I sold like, I don't know, $10,000 worth of stocks. Really sad about that since I had Chipotle, but you live, you learn. I've made more from the Global Collective now, but like that one hurt. Anyway, I sold 10 grand and I was like, okay, what do I do with this? And I was like, what if I just dump money into my silly idea? I was like, what if I just dump $2,000 or $3,000 into this reselling from far away, see how it goes. And if worst case scenario, I lost 3,000 and I'm going to be bummed about it, but it's not going to like change my life at this point because I've got savings and, and so I call up a friend on a Monday or Tuesday. She just had her second baby and she's been wanting to go back to work, but she can't because in this country, we can't really like help moms out.
No.
So she was like, she couldn't go back to work and she likes to work. And she was kind of like, I don't know what to do with my time. Like, I love the kids, but I feel like I need something else or
Right.
whatever. And I call her up on a Tuesday and I'm like, hey, I got an idea. This girl is like down. She's one of my besties. It would be like calling Alicia or Carrie or like I just called her and I was like, I got a crazy idea. I know you have an extra room in the back, like a storage space. Um, would you help me launch this business? What you have to do is receive the items, check them, photograph them, and pack them. And she didn't ask me any other question, and she's like, I'm in.
Yeah.
So we literally started the next week or something.
That's
And I
cool.
just started sending stuff over and over. And so I don't know, everything's been kind of like this weird one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, and I just keep following that path and it's gotten me to a great place so far.
How long have you now been doing the resale? Like, how long is the Global Collective? When was it that when you had gotten your friend involved and all of a sudden this business was taking shape? How long's it been?
2019.
Okay. So, I mean, that's a great stretch. That's an absolutely great stretch.
Yeah. I did only reselling up until the pandemic.
Yeah.
Going like, I was oddly enough, more expensive things started to sell. It was a really weird time because nobody was going out. And I think the people that couldn't normally buy that stuff but were treating themselves were kind of, taking it easy on that. But there were also people that were just bored that did have the money to shop and were like, give me that Louis Vuitton bag, right?
That's what
So
I
it was a
would've
weird
guessed.
time. Yeah. There was a lot of bored people shopping for higher end stuff. So I was like, maybe I should push a little bit higher end, right? Keep pushing the price up. But I got stuck in Mexico for a lot of months, like 5 months when everything closed. And I was really bummed then, but I'm so happy it happened the way it did because Marco stayed here with his dad and his grandma who's got dementia. So he was stuck here with them and I was stuck with my mom who would have been alone all those months.
Yeah.
So I guess it worked out the way it should have, but I was bored. I was depressed. We all thought we were dying. We didn't know what was going on. And so I was like, what do I do with my time? Right. Like I'm going like stir crazy. I can't sit still. So I'm like, I know a lot about designer. I know a lot about authenticating pieces. So I was like, maybe I'll start offering authentication services, right? To people that do want to get into designer, but don't know how. So that took off. That did really well. People were paying me to do their authentications. And I would send them a little bit, like a little PDF that kind of told them why it's fake, which is something that no one else does. They just say real or fake. So they were paying me a premium to learn about why. And so my whole thing is I like education. I don't want you to come back to me every single freaking time. The next time you have the same shoe, you have an idea of why I said it was fake. Right. So I started doing that. And then the business grew into like reselling and information, right? Now we had a digital product, which was me giving you the authentication. And then in that time, people were so bored that I started creating content and it was hitting. Like I was growing massively on Instagram because nobody had anything to do. Like we were all locked up. So I was getting crazy growth. And as I was sharing some of my sales, people were like, how are you doing this? Like I'm probably one of the only of a small group of just luxury resellers in the community, right? That isn't like a real or whatever. And so people started asking me how I'm doing what I'm doing, right? How are you growing like this? Like, how are you selling these items? How are you buying them? And I was just operating the way I knew how to run, like the way I was taught in corporate America. Like I was just running stats and like data and figuring out what had market demand. And I would run numbers off Poshmark and I would, counter with my own numbers. And so it was the first time I was like, I might be the odd duck here. Like I might be one of the few people running with this kind of information. And so I started sharing more information and somebody asked me like, hey, do you do consultations? I was like, I don't, but I could since I have time. And I started doing consultations and that I do right this second. I love doing that stuff too. So I was like, I was bored. I was locked up. I was like, sure, send me your numbers. Let me see what I can find.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So then that grew and that grew and that grew and that grew. It got to the point where like there was one month I remember it was the May before I launched a course, but I would do price increases every so often because it's really hard to talk for hours,
Mm-hmm.
three on three meetings back to
Yep.
back. And so I was getting
Right.
burnt out and I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
It was one May when it's funny because so when I opened the consultations, I opened them at $100. And
Mm-hmm.
people were like, "You're crazy. The reseller community is cheap. They'll never pay for that." Like they try to get the cheapest things possible. I disagree because of the DMs I was getting, I was like, I don't think they're cheap. I think they're smart with their money. I don't
Yeah.
think they're just gonna throw it at anything, right? And if they knew what to invest in, they probably would, but they didn't know. And so
Right.
I opened it at 100 and I was like, I don't care. If five people show up, five people show up. And I increased it every time because I was getting sick of them. And I was like, I want to do just a little bit of them.
Sure. Right.
Dude,
And you're getting the.
May 20, what?
I was just gonna say for you doing the increases and dwindling the amount, but you're still like I'm getting the same return in the end, so that's what I'm aiming for.
That's my whole business model. I try
Yeah.
to push higher so that I have to do physically less, right?
Yep.
So, and for me, it's like they're getting their return. I mean, I've got crazy testimonials on my Instagram. None of those are paid. I could tell you every single person that's done them. Most of them are students now. But I was like, hey, they invest this one time thing and they get returns forever, right?
Right.
Dude, I opened the last one, the second to last one, I think. It was $200 for an hour consultation. I got 70 booked. I was like, no, no,
Yeah.
no. I'd rather give the
Yeah.
money back. I started having like a breakdown. I went to Mirko. I was like, I don't want to do them. It's not
Right.
about the money anymore. It stopped being fun. And I want to just give these people their money back and not do it, right? And he's like, you can't. Like they've already paid you. They want you to do it. Like just tough out, but like stop them, right? Put a block on it. Stop accepting new people and just put a block on it and do the consultation. I got through them all, and that was the month where like this is it. Like this
Yeah.
is the last. I'm not doing it anymore. There's got to be a better way. And then I built the course. So I don't know, dude. When people ask me how I got into all these things, they just happen. Like something happens along the way that it leads me to something else,
Yeah.
and then that leads to something else, and then me getting sick of those consultations led to the course because I could reach more people with less time, give them more information in
Right.
one spot, and only have to do it once, you know?
So now, if you're looking at the Global Collective, what are the list of all of the services or products that you offer? So we have the resale business, number
Mm-hmm.
one.
Mm-hmm.
And
The
then what else are
resale
we looking at?
business is the motor behind all of it, right? Because
Mhm.
that's what gives me the write-offs. That's what gives me the clout. That's what gives me those crazy return on investments, which
Yep.
you can't get in the market. Like there's nothing you could do legally to get the growth that I'm getting on these flips.
Yeah.
So like that's pretty much like another portfolio of mine, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
and I that powers everything else kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say it's two. It's reselling and it's education.
Mm-hmm.
So I scratched out the authentications because they were too much time. And again, it's something I enjoy doing for myself, like learning about it. But like to sit there and go through all these pictures is not my thing.
Right.
Um,
I'm going to
and
teach you
then
how to do that.
I've
It's
always wanted to do a course that's called like Designer 101, like designer resale. And I took a really cool class before I was a college dropout in fashion school, and it was called something in textiles. And they
Mm-hmm.
gave you a big ass like binder with all the samples you could imagine so you could understand the difference between, like silk and polyester, rayon and this, and like, this kind of seam and that kind of seam. And so I've always thought that was one of my favorite classes I ever took in college. And so I was like, someday when I have time to put that together, I would love to teach like a designer authentication, designer resale class like that.
That's cool.
But right now it's like, that's not what I can do. And so I just cut it to the business. The course is the main offering. And that comes with like a mentorship group, which we talk about things like the economy and like how the markets affect all of this, because we don't live in a cloud, right? If the stock market crashes, or like people have less spending power, guess who's not going to get as many sales, right? And
Yeah.
what sells? Like, as people kind of lose their purchasing power, you've got people that maybe were treating themselves more often, and now they got to choose between like buying groceries and buying like the Madewell top. So
Right.
Right.
it all connects with each other, and I think it's important as a business owner to understand like macroeconomics, like what's happening in the world and what's happening in the country and what's happening with the pensions. And so
Sure.
the mentorship call kind of goes deeper into stuff that I care about that relates to the business. And then now I've got a subscription page on Instagram, because Instagram was blocking a lot of my posts because of copyright issues with the brands, and the brands don't like it when you post whatever. And
Mm.
so now I've had a hidden page, but right now that's what's being offered at the Global Collective. You can go in and buy really expensive designer stuff for less, or you can learn how to do it.
Have you completely cut out the one-on-ones at this point? Or do you
God,
still
never
have
again.
that as like never? Yeah.
No, 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 never, never
Yeah.
again. I would lose my voice. I have a
Do
new
you,
respect for therapists, for motivational speakers, for
Right.
podcasters. Like,
yeah.
I couldn't
Yeah, it's
do
a
it. I was
lot.
so burnt out. But I do always, so the girls that did consultations with me, they got a massive discount off the course. They
Mm-hmm.
got discounts off my dashboard. I have that's another thing. I have like a physical dashboard, a digital product that I sell that
Remember you
goes with
told
the
me that.
course. But
Yeah.
like, those people will always have like a special place, because they trusted a complete stranger on the internet to do consultations, and they taught me so much about the business. And I
Yeah.
couldn't have built the course if I didn't have access to 270 people's different businesses, and understand that even though they were all completely different, they had
Mm-hmm.
similar pain points. So like that really, even though I don't know if I'll ever do them again, I couldn't have built what I built without doing that.
That's cool. I
Absolutely.
like you call that out. Issa, was your reach like in the beginning? I mean, obviously now you've garnered an audience, but was it all social?
Yeah, like social media.
Yeah, social media and like word of mouth, I'm assuming too, for maybe people that had bought from you before and then were like, oh, I now that she's offering X, Y, and Z, I'm kind of interested to get into this. Like how were you
Yeah,
reaching, potential people?
all social media.
Okay.
Actually, all Instagram. I didn't start TikTok till way later.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the catch 22 these days, right? Like, these platforms have way too much uh, control over your livelihood. Like, I know a
Yep.
girl that I really like in the industry. She also does kind of designer stuff, and has like a program that she is teaching and whatever. But so she posted something about a fake, like a knockoff of the brand, trying to educate people. It was kind of funny. And Instagram took her account down and never told her why. And then it just gone. She had like, I think she had something like 8,000 followers. And then
Mm-hmm.
it takes a long time to build that. And then from one
Yeah.
day to the next,
Yeah.
she's just gone. Like, man, she just start over. So
Sheesh.
it's tough because they have such a big control over your livelihood, but they also give you these opportunities. I was just one girl in in the world, just sitting there in her computer or her laptop making this content, and you're able to reach thousands of people for free, right?
Yeah.
Somebody comes from like a marketing background, like the amount of money we'd have to spend at PAX to get this kind of exposure that wasn't social media is insane, right? Like, you have to pay so much money to have 8, 9, 15, 20,000 people look at your stuff. And here
Absolutely.
you've got something that, if you've got a good enough, hook or sound or idea or whatever, it
Hmm.
travels to 20,000 people overnight.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So it's the
Did you
exchange, like dancing with the devil.
Were there a lot of people that were doing something similar? Not the reselling part, but like the education piece of it, were there a lot of people, or was this a space where you're like, someone's kind of doing this, but I'm going to add this piece of, value, if you will?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's funny because so in 2020 in the community they called it the course mania 2020 because everyone and their mother came out with a course, right?
Yep.
And I'm really
got
happy
it.
I didn't do it then because they all a lot of them bombed. Like I think a lot of people started learning about digital courses and they're like, oh shit, I'll do it. Like $50, right? Times 100 people, like I could cash in. But what are you teaching? What's your experience? Like, what makes you the right fit to help people with their business
Right.
and the responsibility, right? What if you tell them something that's
Sure.
completely bogus and it's worse for them? And so I think there was a lot of people that I think they had good intentions, but they didn't have the background. So I
Right.
did have one friend in the community that helped me grow a lot. Her name's Jen Warrens, I think is how you pronounce her last name, but I don't call people by their last name. So um, Jen has always helped me with Instagram. She would always post, like push my posts, and we'd meet up in LA, and she was super supportive. And day one, she's like, "You need to do a course. Like, we need to
Yeah.
hear from you, like your experience or whatever." And then when the courses came out, there was so much hate and people going like, "Oh, they're monetizing, like they're taking advantage of people or whatever." It was
Right.
horrible. Like everyone got, like bullied for that. And I was like, I don't think this is the time to like come out right now. And so instead of doing a course, I dove into the one-on-ones, which is what
Right.
gave me a very unique understanding of the whole community, of the whole industry, versus just because these people were doing the courses based on personal experience,
Mm-hmm.
no background, and no real understanding of how other businesses look, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I go into the one-on-ones, I learn things that I didn't understand because I'm doing designer, right? I've got capital to work with. And so it's a very different perspective what I'm living through versus the people that I'm doing their businesses. And so I start connecting dots and I'm like, wait a minute, this is the 10th consultation I've done. And these girls all pretty much they're not managing inventory, they're not managing cash flow, they're not tracking the right data, they're not focusing on averages. And so it just starts to click different. But dude, there
Yeah.
were so many courses. And I do think that gave me an edge because so many people had been burned,
Yep.
but I waited long enough. I waited 2 years to come out with mine. And so I think people had kind of like come full circle and been like, okay, I'll give this one last shot. I'll give this course thing one last shot. And
Right.
then they go to mine. Like the first round, I was getting testimonials every day as people were taking it, and they said things like, "I took X course, in 2020, and I can't believe how different this is, and whatever." So I think that sped up my growth because
Mm-hmm.
I was
That's
getting not
awesome.
just testimonials, but like they had a point of reference, they had a comparison to make, and so it kind of like cemented the fact that I wasn't out there for a money grab. Like I
Right.
waited for the right time, I had the right experience, and I
Right.
had just insights that many people didn't have.
Love it. Curious, biggest takeaway that you've had at this point with starting your own business at the level of success you're at right now. If you were, again, you got some young person that's looking to venture into this, best nugget or gold tip of advice that you would like throw at them?
That the numbers matter like day one. That
Yeah.
like I think people get wrapped up in the fun of business, like the fun what we do is really fun, right? Shopping, and like you get to buy pretty things online, and like I don't know if you like design, like I bet you your favorite part is like actually sitting there and designing. The money
Mm-hmm.
comes from the boring stuff, right?
Yep.
Like the business happens in the boring stuff that nobody wants to deal with, like running your cash flows, like making sure that you're running off data, not what you think is cool, not what you would like to do. And the numbers start telling you what to do based on what's happening. So what's really
Right.
cool is we've got this business dashboard that we built because I didn't like any of the ones that were out there. And what we tell people is your business is trying to tell you something all the
Yeah.
time, right? We just don't speak its language. So if you could learn to understand the data and read market data and your own numbers, there's a story already there. So then once I finally am able to understand what the business is telling me, the business is probably going like, hey, idiot, like, what are you doing selling this brand or these, like categories when you're killing it over here? Like,
Right.
why wouldn't you put your time into kind of that whole Pareto principle, right? Like 20/80. Like, why wouldn't you put, like, if 80% is coming from that 20, why wouldn't you
Mm-hmm.
put more, double down in the area that's paying you most?
Right.
But I think the biggest issue I saw in all of the businesses that I reviewed is no structure, no strategy, no organization, like
No
doing things because
plan.
it's fun, what
Yeah.
they like. Well, why do you source this? And people are like, oh, because I really like dresses. And it's like, okay, but are they paying you the most? Are they, what's the sell-through rate? What are we looking at here?
Sure.
So that's the biggest piece of advice I would give someone is try to fall in love with the boring stuff.
Yeah.
Educate.
Try to make that
yeah.
interesting.
Educate and plan.
And it does become fun because I think once, like everything, once you understand what that does for you and what that means, I think people don't like numbers because they already have this weird idea in their head. I'm not a math person. I don't like numbers. I don't like to look at spreadsheets. Okay, look at charts then. Those are pictures, right? Don't try to see the black and white of it. Try to find the story. And then once you start finding the story, you're like, this is actually really cool because I don't have to think that hard. It tells me what to focus on or what to follow or,
I think for anybody, there's a level of empowerment. I mean, I would agree tenfolds on your point that there certain things people have perceptions of like, I'm not that, I'm not interested in that, I don't care about that. But then all of a sudden, for being your own boss and being a business owner, the more understanding that you have of your business, why would that not be fun? That's what you're trying to get into. So it's like invest, educate yourself. That makes complete sense. So Alicia, when are you gonna open the sandwich shop?
Oh God, I think I'm over sandwiches. I gotta be honest.
Really?
It's not about the sandwiches.
It's about the data.
No,
I'm just kidding.
We've talked about the sandwich shop.
No.
Yeah.
I do think it's something that you have to love because it can't be a money grab. It really can't unless you've got a bunch of money to throw down and that's just something you're investing in because it becomes your like everyday thought. And this is what I was telling you about the hobbies, right? These used to be my hobbies. Shopping for used items and flipping them online was my hobby. Fixing, like re-dyeing shoes and stuff was my hobby. Designing little things online was my hobby. Photoshopping was my hobby. So now all of my hobbies are my work. So it's this weird thing where I freaking love what I do. Like I wake up every day and I'm so excited and I'm checking my emails at 6 a.m. And that's not true because I wake up at like 10. But like, you know what I mean?
I was like,
I do check them at 6 a.m. Like if I pee, I'll get up, check stuff, and I'll go back to bed. But like I live, eat, breathe, eat the Global Collective. And so it's weird because I've also become a person with no hobbies. I'm the person that works all the time because she loves to work. Yeah. And so I'm in a weird space where my brother's like, and I also have these weird things in my head where I'm like, I must hit this number by this year. And I get really bummed on myself if I don't hit it. And it's like, I made up the rules. I don't have to hit that. I said that out of nowhere. And now I'm bummed that I'm not hitting it. And my brother's like, maybe you need to like step aside, do something that's not related to money that you can't monetize. Because if I learned to knit, I'd probably try to sell that. That's just like my, like my brain's like, but could I sell this?
I would never be a knitter.
I would be so bored.
I think the rules is a good thing though, because it is to your point of at the end of the day having a little bit of flexibility to realize who's setting the rules, but there also is a certain bit of accountability that you're putting on yourself, where you go, okay, I'm going to try to be disciplined. Yeah, I'm going to try to be disciplined. This is a goal I'm setting. I do that for myself all the time.
You have to. You don't have somebody being like, you didn't turn this paper in or you didn't do this or whatever it is. Like you have to be you have to hold yourself accountable.
Mm-hmm. So you do, but I didn't know how hard I'd go on that. Like, I'm
Yeah.
so weird about breaking my own rules now that
Yep.
I make myself really stressed over nothing. And Marco's like, dude, freaking Marco. Marco should be paid as my therapist because he's helped me a lot. I'll freak out and have these days where I'm like, I'm not hitting my numbers, or like this isn't working, or like what am I even doing? Just like freak out
Yeah.
central. And he's like, dude, why does it matter? He's like, okay, so you don't hit the sales number this year or this month or this quarter. And he's like, and then what? And
Yeah.
it's this weird like, oh, it doesn't really matter. You know, like
Yeah.
I put myself in a place where I don't have to hit my numbers, right? I have a certain
Yeah.
operating margin that I have to hit, which I could hit easily. And then like it's my weird expectations of myself.
Yeah.
But once I face them and I'm getting myself all this anxiety, he's like, okay, well, okay, you don't hit it, and then what? And I'm like, I guess nothing,
Yeah.
right?
Your mind
So it's like
immediately goes
this
the doomsday sort of thing, you know?
doomsday, homeless, and losing it all. Like it's all
Yep.
gonna end. Like I go there often. I think it's because of like, family stuff that happened, but I go quickly to, dude,
Yep.
it's all gonna go away. You're gonna be homeless. You're gonna have
Hmm.
nothing left. Your savings are gonna go down. Your stocks are gonna fall, and it's just like it's this constant push to have more. That Mark was always really good at. Like, okay, what if you get one of my biggest fears was getting fired, and
Yeah.
I would have these crazy, like, I had a lot of pressure when I was a brand manager, not from my boss, from myself. And so I
Yeah.
would go into these holes, and Mark was like, okay, and they fire you, and then what? And then I'm like, well, I don't have a job. Well, I won't have money to pay, rent. And he's like, well, I could pay rent. And I'm like, okay, but what if I, need something? And he's like, do you think you could get another job? Well, yeah, I guess I could get another job. And he's like,
Hmm.
okay, so is it that bad? And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I guess it's not.
That's great logic.
And the
Mm.
hobby thing, what? We have a
I was
lag,
to
so
say
I
that's
have to like,
it's great. It's great logic. It's good to have someone that's kind of just like, okay, and then what? And then what? And then all of a sudden your
yeah, he
fears are kind of
keeps pushing. I
subsided.
get mad. I'm not easy when he does the first and then what. Like, I'm being nice now. I'll be like, well, I'm going to be
Hmm.
broke. Like, I get crazy. But as I
Yeah.
go through the and then what, the final and then what is like, yeah, I guess it doesn't matter, huh? Like,
Hmm.
at the end. But then also, it's like with the hobby thing, my brother's like, get a hobby that you can't monetize, that it has nothing to do with whatever. I love to read, right? So I'm like, I'll read. And he's like, you can't read finance or business. And I'm like, what do I do? And so I
Hmm.
try to start reading a
Yeah.
book that's like fantasy. And like 2 minutes later, I'm like, I would rather
Yeah.
throw myself off this cliff than finish this. Or like, what if I took up cooking? I don't like to cook.
Yeah.
Like I've tried it and it's like not interesting to me. And so it's hard because I'm the girl with no hobbies because I put all the hobbies in my business.
I think you're good. A hobby will come. Who cares? It's fine.
I
Crocheting.
don't really have a hobby. It's fine. I just do
Do you have,
things. I don't do just one thing.
You have hobbies.
yeah, but you're
I like
generally more
activities.
like active. Like you like to
Yeah.
work out per se.
Bravo doesn't count as a hobby either.
That's true.
Watching
It is. You
Bravo
went to
and
the convention. I feel like
Yeah,
that
I
kind
kind of
of
feel like
makes
it
it a
is. Yeah.
hobby.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
that's so sad.
I don't know. Who cares? You happy? You're living? You're above ground?
Listen,
Like, who
But
cares?
I think my best thing, I think like my favorite thing about what you're doing right now, and totally correct me if I'm wrong, like some weeks are going to be crazier than others, but like end of the day, you could go on your Global Collective page and be like, hey guys, sorry, crazy couple days. I'll talk to you next Monday. I'll get back to
yeah,
you on this. Like, I mean, your work life balance now versus, years in corporate America are just, you're thriving, I would say, in that space.
I think
Ish,
that work life
know.
balance is weird because again, right? Like it's again we're going back to those cheesy sayings that people say and you roll your eyes and you're like that's fucking stupid, right? And
Yep.
then you live it and you're like maybe it wasn't so stupid. That whole like when you love what you do you don't work a day in your life.
Yeah.
I think it's true. I
Yeah.
love what I do. I'm not doing what I do for anything but my pure enjoyment and happiness. And so it's really hard when people are like, you work too much. That's what I like to do. Like,
Yeah.
my other hobby is like the stock market. I'm learning about options. Like, I can't, help if that does end up making money or not. It's interesting to me because it's like, and maybe what I like is numbers and kind of like winning and losing and like doing that kind of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like work, I don't know if I have a work life balance. I think I have options of when I can disconnect and what I get to work on and what I want to do.
Yeah.
Technically, could I shut everything off right now and be like, I'll be back in a month? Yeah. But I'd be bored. I'd be
You'd be
checking
full
it all the
circle.
time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would
Marco
want
would
to
hate
come
you.
back to it. Margot would hate me. Like, I was awful. It
Yeah.
was the worst version of myself. That, like, I now, in hindsight, I'm like, I was such a, I was
Well,
literally
I think,
horrible.
I mean, you guys did get some good travels in, so that's
Yeah, we
great.
did.
You didn't end up murdering one another, or more so, he did not murder you. Moral of the story, what I got out of this whole conversation
Yeah.
is
What
that
is?
Marco is an angel
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
Issa's
He
a
really
bee.
is.
No, I'm just kidding.
He really is. And honestly, like, he'll never, I'm not going to tell him because then things get to people's heads or whatever. But, and he won't, he doesn't even have Instagram, so I'm not going to tell him about this. But he literally changed my life. Like, he
That's
changed the
amazing.
way I think, and he changed the path I was on. He changed everything, right? Like, before I met him, I was brought up in a very kind of conservative, not necessarily conservative politically or like religiously, but like, a family in Mexico that we did things like this, and you
Mm-hmm.
got married at this age and you had kids and you found a good husband with a good name and like this kind of like old fashioned thing. And I kind of was like,
Right.
I guess that's what I'm gonna have to do, but I hated the idea. Like, it just never sat with me.
Sure.
And I was like the rebel, and I was going out and partying and doing everything I possibly could to not be that person. And then I left, and it's just meeting this person that showed me this whole new, like, way of thinking, way of valuing time and money, and like, take care of yourself. Like, don't depend. Like, my biggest fear was like, my mom and my dad had like a good life, like they had money, everything you thought was a good life. And guess what? There's no guarantees. Like, we lost everything. Like, money went away. They got divorced. So
Yeah.
this whole like things have to look this way to work out didn't make sense to me since a very young age. But then this person comes along and he's like, like, do what you love, like invest time in what you think you want to do, and then the money will come. Don't chase the money. Like, we're gonna be
Yeah.
fine. And a very European, maybe way of life, like very progressive. Like, don't need a man to take care of you. Take care of yourself. Like, make sure that you're
Sure.
with someone, me or whoever it is, because you want to be there.
Right. Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I always tell people too. It's kind of one of those things because I fall into your category a little bit where I start to do the doomsday of the four, trying to look in the crystal ball and figure out and start to. But I then will rein myself back and be like, what's the point of worrying until I need to worry about something? Like, just fucking take a beat. Everything is fine. If shit goes south, you've proven time and time again that you can figure it out. So just put faith in your
Yeah.
like, I'm capable, and let's just relax about it. Issa, anybody that checks us out, if they're interested in checking you out, checking out, what's the best place to come find you? Is it going to be Instagram, sites? Where are we looking?
Yeah, it's definitely Instagram. It's at the Global Collective Co.
Okay.
I'm on TikTok, but I don't think I'm going to continue aggressively there. It's not my thing.
It's a different,
like, I've
different
got
beast.
it's a different beast. I don't
Yes.
feel like myself there. So
I have been. I had like met with. It's one of Lexi's friends here who's in her 20s that she met when she worked at the design agency here. But
yeah,
that's her thing is like social media marketing. And I met with her to try to get tips, and I was like, how the fuck do you crack this nut for what TikTok is? And I felt the same thing where I was just, this is one of the first times where I feel dated. And I was
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
I have to do what? This is the content that pushes on there. I'm like, it's not my cup of tea, dude.
I think it's weird. It is definitely generational, but like think about it, right? I came from like a traditional marketing background. You've done a lot of like, like marketing art, kind of that thing, right? We've got a way that we think things work. So for
Yep.
me, it's like you got to run a marketing campaign. Your message has to be clear. It has to be concise. Um, Branding, so colors. You always use the same font, stuff like that. It's very buttoned up, which is what I've kind of learned to do in the brand side.
Yep.
And that shit doesn't work on TikTok. People want you to
No.
roll out of bed, grainy video, and be like,
Phone. Yep.
I found a zit today on my face, and that shit blows up, right?
Yep.
It's also crazy what blows up on there. Like I take my time, I make videos that like are informational, but like light, but funny. Like I've got all this thought into it, and it bombs, tanks. And
Yep.
then some teenagers talking about a dupe at Walmart or whatever, and it's like 8 million views, and you're like,
Dude.
oh,
Yeah.
It's
weird.
bonkers. I don't get it.
Yeah. And again, at the end of the day, you're not getting a return off of it. Then you're just kind of like, why the heck would I invest in this at this moment? So
Yeah.
This was good. Did we leave any stone unturned? This was great, by the way. You were fantastic. Thank you for this.
Thanks. It's hard because I hear myself. I didn't even tell you guys because I don't hear you until a little bit later, and then I hear myself right after I finish talking.
Well, you are a champ for doing this. I think on our end, it's going to sound amazing. I'm not worried at all about that. This was fantastic. Was there anything that we didn't touch? I think that we kind of hit.
I also feel bad because like when you would start talking, I don't see that you're talking until like half a second later. So then I would cut you off.
Fine. Totally fine.
Oh, don't
worry. I think it was totally fine.
I know what we left out. Alicia wanted to talk about alternatives. But I don't know if it goes in there.
Nick, do you know this?
I don't know what this is.
Nick's alternative.
Yeah, your alternative. So Issa, she, the way that she grew up, like you already said, like you have some very, very like wealthy, quintessential, like just beautiful bombshells,
kind of and like preppy-ish, like in the more traditional way of doing things, I guess.
Okay.
So I found out that a couple years ago that Issa calls some of her friends her alternative friends.
Oh, fun.
Because if you look at Issa, she's got the red lipstick, the hair is always done.
I've got no tattoos, no piercings.
Right.
I don't wear like, dog collars or, like fan t-shirts,
So that, which is what I did actually have on before this, was a Marilyn Manson t-shirt.
I thought you were going to say a dog collar. I was going to be like, whoa.
No, can you imagine?
I wouldn't have been shocked. I would have been like, oh, okay.
8 a.m.
Monday.
8 a.m. dog collar. So, like, yeah, it is really funny. So if you have tattoos, music-related, piercings.
Long hair.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like wear her alternative and like
friends.
Vans or Converse or,
badge of honor.
But that's what it's so funny though, because for as long as I've known you, it's like we really are like, I love Issa so much. She is like a sister. She's family for life, right? But we couldn't be more fucking opposite, like with our interests and things. But somehow, but so like shopping, I'm like, get out of here. Like, no, thank you. All these things.
I hate sports. I don't work out. Ugh.
Yeah, but when we're together, we just have the best time. Yeah, well, that I'm actually like, I'm with you. But I like activities. Like every weekend, I'm either on a hike, I'm kayaking, I'm swimming, I'm snorkeling, I'm doing something, right? Like I don't just like sit still. Where Issa's like a cat. Like she's like, can we lay in bed? Actually, when we came out for her wedding was the first time in a long time. I was like, wait, do you care if I like watch Bravo on my computer and we just like stay in bed? She's like, you kidding? This is like my dream. Like, I'm going to work. You go do this. I was like, this is awesome because I don't sit still enough, surprisingly.
You're welcome. I'm glad my wedding could provide that opportunity for you to sit still.
Yeah. So the alternatives will thrive.
It's the alternative group. And then Marco and they'd invite us to do something because I have friends that aren't alternative.
Oh, yeah. This is
and so Marco's not alternative either. Like he doesn't have any tattoos, no piercings, no like he doesn't party, he doesn't drink, like that stuff. And so I'd be like, hey, Alicia is asking us if we want to go watch a game at Buffalo Wild Wings or wherever we used to go. And I'm like, is it alternative Sundays? And then Marco would be like,
Yeah.
alternative Sundays. Or, I don't know, like, maybe not alternative Sunday today. So they were the
Yeah,
alternatives for the longest time until I confessed to her that I had this nickname for them. And then that group was the alternatives.
That could have got that
it's like the
nickname.
wild cards.
That nickname could have been a lot worse. So I think alternatives is a win.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's a win. Yeah.
No, it's just funny because like she'd be like, "Oh, like, do you want to do something on Saturday?" It'd be like, "Wait, who's it with?
Yep.
Is it like the alternatives or like this?" Because it's like based on like, I feel like that's going to be a late night.
Yep.
Like you're probably going to be hungover tomorrow.
There's a range
all
of
these
alternativity, right? So that like there's some here, and so it depends who she's going with. If it gets too far on the scale, I'm like, no thanks.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, that alternative is going to be there? Like, nah.
I love that.
Man. Well, I love you. This was
great.
awesome.
Thank you guys.
Thank you
I
so
tried.
much.
I hope that you can
Crushed.
use some of this. I heard myself
Crushed.
the whole time.
No, this was
That
crushed.
sucks.
We didn't hear any. It sounded great on our end. So
I feel like I was talking the whole time because I can't hear when you start talking until
that's the point, though.
Come over me.
Yeah.
That's the point. We had you on
I
because
wanna
we
hear
wanted
what
to hear you talk. Yeah.
People know I talk.
Yeah,
a
no
lot
one wants to
anyway,
hear
so it
me
doesn't
talk.
matter. I mean, I don't
All
know.
right.
No,
If
this
you
is
keep
really
telling
cool.
people you hate video games.
No, I stopped that.
Or are you gonna?
I